Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Don't Forget About School-Age Childcare in Your Consumer Education Website. My name is Amy Page. I'm an Early Childhood Systems Consultant with the State Capacity Building Center. And today's webinar is part of the Hot Topics in Consumer Education website series. The series is designed to bring you information and resources in order to help you enhance your consumer education website. If today is your first participation in the series, you have plenty of time to participate in additional topics as the series runs through December. It showcases topics such as the one today that are a mix of both best practices as well as a foundation in the required elements of the consumer education websites. Our goal is to give you ways in which you can enhance how families, child care providers, and other stakeholders experience your website. You want to be sure to make sure that you check the webinar announcements so that you can alert the right staff in your states or territories so that they can be on the upcoming calls. Some of the webinars are definitely more technical in nature, and so you would want to probably have your IT people, communication staff, or other stakeholders listen in so that they can take full advantage of the information and resources that we'll share in each of the webinars. Later on in today's webinar, we will put the link to the webinar series in the chat box so that you'll be able to access it. It will also take you to our resource page where you'll find new resources on how you can enhance your consumer education website. There are also recordings to the previous webinars from the series that began back in April. Throughout the webinar today, we'd like for you to use the chat feature to type in the questions you might have on the topic. We do have all of the participants muted to cut down on background noise as we go through the information today. And we will remind you throughout the webinar as well to use the chat box to type in any questions that you may have. We will take your questions, and then in 2 weeks on September 26th from 2 to 2:30 p.m. we'll answer as many of those questions as we can in the Ask Me Anything webinar. If you think of a question after today's webinar, you can also email us, and we will provide you with that information at the end of today's call so that you will be able to do that. Now I'd like to take an opportunity to go ahead and introduce my co-presenter for today, Heidi Rosenberg with the National Center on After School and Summer Enrichment. We're really glad to have Heidi with us today to talk to us about how consumer education websites fit into the work that NCASE does as well. The agenda for today is to focus on the data on school-age child care, including how states are integrating this type of care into the consumer education websites. We also want to help kind of lay the framework for how you can think of ways that you could think how you can better serve your families with recommendations on child care, school-age children via searches as well as filters and resources that are focused on school-age friendly information that you can have on your consumer education website. Also opportunities for partnerships and collaboration. We want to start off by taking a moment to let you tell us what your role is as you're coming into the webinar. So you'll see on your screen now that there are several different types of positions or roles. If you'll just take just a quick moment to let us know who all is on the call. Great, it looks like we have half of our audience at this time are with state government. Technical assistance professionals, wonderful. We've got a pretty good split between state government as well as TA professionals, and then some non-state government, state-level folks. Those of you that have listed other, if you'd like to, please feel free to type into the chat box what your role is as well. Okay. Great. Thank you so much for letting us know who we have. We anticipate that we may have additional folks joining us as the call goes on, but we're going to go ahead and get started with the information for today. Thank you for participating in the poll. Okay. Some of you that have participated in some of the prior webinar series may remember this slide from back during the August webinar, but it's really important to reiterate. We want to really focus in on and talk about the idea of moving beyond just compliance as it's related to the consumer education websites. Improving how someone uses your website not only helps them find the right child care option, it goes beyond that and is more than just having all of the information on your website or making the website accessible for people with disabilities. Today we want you to really think about the families that might use your consumer education website. More than likely you have children, that you have families that have children of various ages that need child care. Many times families come to our websites and they're looking for multiple types of care to accommodate their families and the ages of the children that they have. While your website should include a feature for searching for child care by the age of the child, we really want to encourage you to think about expanding what your consumer education website offers for school-age children. During the call today, we'll talk about some of the data surrounding school-age child care and talk about ways to enhance your child care search feature and the information you can provide for school-age children. At the end of today, we all want our consumer education website to build trust with our audiences, and in this case, that would be the families that you are providing the information for. We want the information and the resources that you provide to be valuable, useful, and also reliable. And then hopefully they'll think of your consumer education website first and turn to it to answer their questions. So as we walk through ways to include school-age child care information on your consumer education website, we hope that they will jumpstart some ideas about how to raise the quality of experiences your target audiences, like parents and providers, have when they use your website to find answers to their child care questions. When we're thinking about school-age child care, here are a few questions to keep in mind as we go throughout the webinar. While these questions are definitely general in nature, they could most certainly be applied to school-age children. It's extremely important that school-age information be provided in your consumer education website. A large percentage of CCDF funds, that we'll talk about this more in detail later, but a large percentage of the funds support school-age kids. Your audiences include families with school-age children, and you want to, again, think about families that have children of multiple ages. A lot of times we make assumptions also that the words our audience knows and the knowledge level about child care that they bring when they're visiting our websites. So we want to make sure that the website uses language that is easy to understand, tying back into the plain language requirement that CCDF sets forth. Additionally, you also always want to make sure that your website is easy to navigate for your intended audience. When you're thinking about your website, you always want to put audience first and consider them your Northern Star. You want to make sure that you define your audience, identify their most frequent and important tasks, and ensure your content guides them to those tasks. So since families are one of the primary audiences for consumer education websites, when we think about designing good experiences for families, you want to think about these three things. Now think about that specifically through the lens of a family that has multiple children, including a school-age child. Those are the families that are part of your target audience as well. So good web experience starts with thinking through what their needs are when they come to your website. Their needs may be a little different than the family who has a child just starting in child care as an infant for the first time, but school-age families are probably a large part of your target audience. We want to make sure that we focus in closely and think about what types of tasks they might be doing when they come to your consumer education website. Many times the driver for them first visiting the website is strictly a search for child care. But they also might even need some information and resources to help them make decisions about child care, and they may need other types of information as well. Parents certainly have different questions than child care providers do, and even parents have different questions from each other, questions that they are definitely trying to answer based on the needs of their child, their financial situation, and where they work. Most all of you have probably seen the consumer education infographic that's presented here on this slide. It has information on the left side regarding the CCDF requirements. And I know that, again, you all are probably very familiar with that. And we really want to think about going in above and beyond what those requirements are and think about what families' needs are and how they look, what they are looking for as they visit your consumer education website. Down at the bottom, you'll note that this handout is available for download, and it's also accessible on the website that the resources from the webinar series are on as well. It lists the requirements, and then, like I said, on the back side, there are a list of recommended areas of information that you could add to your website in addition to the required information. Those are areas of information such as information on how to access child care assistance, general child development information on milestones, as well as developmental screening, family engagement resources, information on Part B and Part C, and then also other family assistance programs like TANF and so on. Today we're going to talk about ways you can include some of this information either in your child care search or as additional information for families who have school-aged children. So with that in mind, we want to go ahead, now that we're thinking about just consumer education websites in general, and think about what features would be helpful for families of school-aged children, as well as what information and resources they may need. So the first question you'll see on your screen now, there are two chat boxes to the right of the slide. We would like everyone to just take a moment to type in some of the information about what features would be helpful for families with school-aged children on websites, and then in the box below that, what information and resources you think that they may need. When you're thinking about the features, think about key features with the child care searches and what would be helpful to have available to help families navigate the website. And then again, the resources in general might be some of the things from the recommendation side of the infographic as far as child development, developmental screening. Great, we have some suggestions coming in for the features, such as schools served, proximity to schools, information about the importance of regulated care, as far as resources go, some before and after school care options and related information. Great. Features, somebody noted hours of operation, great. Whether they are open during just the school year or year-round. We're going to take just another moment for everyone to type in any thoughts they have regarding these questions. Quality indicators. Transportation to schools for aftercare. So it looks like we're able to get a big list of the different types of features, which will be great leading into the discussion that we're going to have later on in the webinar, and some of the examples that we're going to show. And we also have a section at the end of the webinar, too, about what types of resources to include and some national resources that are available. Great. A couple folks have just typed in types of activities as part of the features. Okay, just take another second or two. Okay. As far as information and resources, some financial health, curriculum, and wellness resources. And then another feature would be any special needs accommodations that the Child Care Search or the Consumer Education website can focus on. Great. Thanks so much to everyone for your input. We're going to kind of keep those points in mind, and you will see as we go throughout the rest of the webinar and how we've kind of broken down the information to deliver to you today. We'll focus in greater depth regarding some of those areas. So thank you for that. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to Heidi Rosenberg to talk a little bit more about their work with NCASE in school-age childcare. Heidi?
Great, thanks Amy. So many of you are probably already familiar with the National Center for After School and Summer Enrichment, or NCASE's work, but for those who aren't, just the broad goal of the center is to ensure that school-age children and families of low income have increased access to after-school and summer learning experiences that contribute to their overall development and academic achievement. So when the Office of Child Care created NCASE, it defined school ages 5 through 12, and this definition acknowledges that many 5-year-olds are in kindergarten and need quality after-school and summer childcare. So before we get into a discussion of how consumer ed efforts can help serve families of school-age children, I thought it would be good to take a look at how school age fits within the overall population of children served through subsidies. So in fiscal year 2016, nearly half of all children served through CCDF subsidies were school age, with on average over 600,000 school age children served through subsidies each month. So parents of school-age children seek care for both the after-school hours as well as during the summer months when school is not in session. And these care categories can be more complicated than full-day year-round infant, toddler, and preschool care that families served through subsidies often access because of the mix of part-time and full-time care needs of school-age kids. So the large proportion of children served through subsidies who are school age suggests that many parents accessing consumer education websites will be searching for care for this age group, and as Amy mentioned, often in conjunction with searching for care for younger children. So this makes it even more important that these websites include school age friendly elements so that you can best reach your full target audience. So in addition, parents might be searching for care for children of multiple ages at the same time, which means they may have different needs for different children, and the ability to use consumer education websites to quickly filter the types of care that meets their needs will increase the chances of them using the website to find safe, quality child care as opposed to more informal mechanisms of child care searches. So one other thing that we know is that the majority of school-age children served through subsidies, or 71%, are served in child care centers, with 1/4 served in child care homes. And a very small percentage of school-age children are served in their own home. So these numbers vary from state to state. These are the overall national averages here. Some states serve much higher percentages of school-age children in family child care homes. The one thing that doesn't tend to vary much is the very small percent that's served in their own home. And another interesting finding from our data work, looking at both national and state level data, is that while nationally there's an 8% increase in the number of school-age children served through subsidies during the summer months, in 28 states and territories there's a double-digit percent increase of 10% or greater in the number of school-age children served during the summertime. So as with the child care settings data, the change in the number served over the summer months varies from state to state, with some even seeing a decrease in the number of children served through subsidies. However, overall nationally there is an 8% increase, with some states seeing a much higher increase than that. So this summer-specific increase suggests that not only is it important for consumer education websites to include school-age related elements in general, but that it's also really important for parents to find summertime childcare in particular. And we don't yet know what accounts for this spike in some states rather than in others, and in the summer childcare needs, you wouldn't expect that to necessarily vary from state to state. But that does suggest that families who are utilizing subsidies for childcare would benefit from consumer education website details about school-age programming, not just during the school year, but during the summer months as well. So as you're aware, reauthorization of the CCDBG Act brought with it an increased emphasis on consumer education and the need to help parents make informed decisions about choosing quality childcare. So last fall, and again in the early spring, NCASE conducted a scan of all the state and territory consumer education websites to see how school-age providers were showing up in these searches. So we also looked at whether websites included information about whether providers accepted CCDF subsidies, whether license-exempt providers were included, and whether website users could customize their search or filter their search with tools such as age filters or subsidy acceptance. So what we did not look at, and I just want to point this out, we did not look at required elements such as inspection or monitoring reports and how they were posted. We were mainly looking at the website from the perspective of a parent seeking school-age child care who would be using subsidies to pay for that care. So what we found in our scan was that 43 websites did include information about the ages served. Sometimes this information is available right in the initial search results listing. Other times the user would need to click through multiple screens or layers to get to this information. 36 of the websites allow users to filter for school age, either by entering a child's age or an age range, or by a school age as a program type label. And that can help users narrow or refine their search so that they're only seeing providers that serve the age range they need. There are 30 websites that include information about whether providers accept subsidies, and 20 websites allow users to filter or customize their search so that the only results they're getting back are subsidy providers. And this was something that was important for us to look at because as NCASE, we do serve the audience of families who are utilizing subsidies to pay for childcare. So this was one of the reasons that we looked at this in addition to the age piece. It's important to note that subsidies are listed in different ways on states' websites. Sometimes they're listed as state child care assistance or CCAP or purchase of care or publicly funded child care. And an important thing to note about that is just making sure that part of the consumer education element is making sure that parents are going to be familiar with those terms and what they mean. So that's something that we don't know at the national level in terms of what is the common way that parents and referring agencies refer to subsidies from state to state. But because of the way that we saw that varied across websites, that was something that we just noted as being an important piece to consider when websites list subsidy acceptance, is making sure that it's using terminology that would be familiar to parents. So another thing that we examined was license-exempt providers and their inclusion on the website. So as you undoubtedly know, consumer education websites must list all licensed providers in the state, but they are not required to include license-exempt programs. However, we know that in the after-school arena in general, many programs that serve school-age children are license-exempt, particularly after-school programs that operate at public schools. And because of this, we examined how many websites included license-exempt providers using the CCDF state plans as the data source. So we specifically looked at whether websites included license-exempt CCDF providers, since our focus is families using subsidies. There are a few other categories of license-exempt providers in addition to those. And so what we found was that of the 31 states and territories that include license-exempt providers on their websites, in 6 cases that just pertained to license-exempt centers. In 5, it included license-exempt family child care homes. And in 20 cases, that included both license-exempt CCDF centers and family child care homes. So the states and territories whose websites do include license-exempt providers can help to ensure that parents of school-age children have a more complete range of options to meet their child care needs. So at that, I'm going to turn this back over to Amy to get us into a little bit more of the elements of website searches.
Great, thanks, Heidi. The first element of a child care search that we want to focus on is actually school-age friendly child care search tools. So we'd like to take the next few minutes to talk about how to make those tools user-friendly for families seeking school-age care and also share some state examples. The examples that follow highlight the features that you see here on your screen about how your searches can become more school-age friendly. You want to be sure to include licensed and license-exempt school-age child care programs in your search database. Also be able to enhance your search filters so that it can focus in on school-age care, and then enhance the information presented in the search results themselves. In thinking about integrating school-age friendly search filters, having a dynamic search filter so that users can choose more than one item in a list is extremely helpful. This is particularly helpful for those families we talked about early on in the webinar as your target audience that may have children that are in more than one age group. And so dynamic search filters are really critical in order so that the families can make one search and find all of their needs and providers that match all of their needs. Also having search filters by age group and then other school-age friendly care attributes. Many of those you all mentioned on the poll earlier, such as transportation, when school-age care offers summer camps, what programs are offering summer camps, and then scheduling. Are the programs school year only? Are they year-round programs, summer care, and then also school vacation care during breaks over holidays or school holidays such as spring break and fall break. So that said, many of the times it's often hard to maintain enhanced data that can help support all of these search features. Some options for doing that could be providing an option for programs to be able to update information via a self-serve portal. Again, that would have to be tied to licensing systems so that providers are, not able to go in and alter anything that would, change the current license or registration that they maybe have. And also integrating data collection of new attributes into licensing visits and having licensing staff help collect information from programs that then can be updated in your database to help enhance additional search filters. The first example we want to take a look at comes to us from Oklahoma, and over the next couple of slides you'll see some of the key features that they have outlined. Particularly here, where the red arrow is noted, they have information about when program operations occur. And so there is a dynamic search filter to be able to select daytime only, evenings, and even overnight and weekend care, as well as drop-in care. And then some of the other options that families can select from include year-round, school year only, summer break only, school vacations, and sick care as well. So you can see that there's a variety of different options and filters that they can choose from. Another focus, too, is that they have the ages accepted by programs broken down into infant care, one-year-old care, and then on up through the age groups, as well as a category for 6-plus-year-olds to focus in on school-age care. And then there is an additional search feature option for transportation, whether or not transportation is provided to schools in the area, as well as children's homes and field trips. So that's our first example from Oklahoma. And then as we look on further, Minnesota is our next example. And again, you'll see here where they have their search includes age groups and yearly schedule options as well. It allows you to select more than one age group if you're searching for care for more than one child, again, making that very important for families that are looking for care across ages. The search data also includes both licensed and license-exempt facilities. Patty's going to talk with us a little bit now regarding some of the search filters for New Mexico.
Sure, thanks. So New Mexico is another good example of a site with really helpful search filters. As you can see here with the highlighted options, you can choose from the very first page. You can actually, from the first page, you can click on Advanced Search option to get to this list of filters. And at that point, you can select type of care. Head Start programs is just the example that we have there. There's also school-age programs above it. You could select the quality rating, and you could select ages served. You can also filter for whether or not a provider accepts child care assistance. So just as with the other examples that Amy shared, this is a really nice way to allow a user to filter at the outset, and especially if you have a dynamic search features here where it's not a mutually exclusive category. So if, for instance, a parent wanted to run one search to cover a 3-year-old and, say, an 8-year-old and find all the options that pertain to both, being able to select both of those options to run would then make it so that they didn't have to run the same search over again for a different age child. And Indiana is yet another example of a website that has really helpful filters and customization options right at the outset. So here right on the initial page, before you even launch a search, you can select multiple filters such as the age ranges served, the provider type. In this case, if it's hard to see on the screen, they have both unlicensed and licensed centers and homes. And then you can also click whether or not you want to see CCDF providers. So again, these are just great examples of ways that you can customize a search at the outset, or at least refine it after you run an initial search, so that parents can have a better way to target their search and not have to hunt around among the search result listings. So in addition to filters that can allow people to customize a search from the start or refine an existing search, another way that websites can be really helpful is by including as much information as possible in the search results listing, so that parents don't have to call individual providers to find out information such as ages served, whether they accept subsidies, whether they offer transportation, and some of the other features that folks indicated in the earlier poll could be really helpful. So just remembering that that type of information, ages served, subsidy, transportation, those can be really basic screening criteria that can determine whether a provider is even an option for a parent given their child care needs. So it's extremely helpful if some of that information can be provided upfront in the search results listings without them having to dig around further or call. So some websites pack a lot of this information into their search results. And also including things like whether or not they offer care during summer camp or school breaks. And as you know, if quality information is available, it needs to be posted on the consumer education website. But when it comes to school-age child care, one thing that's really important to remember is that those providers are much less likely than early childhood providers to participate in QIS or other formal quality rating systems. And even in states that require subsidy-receiving programs to participate in the QIS, there are usually exemptions for school-age programs. So I think it's really important for parents to realize that many school-age programs don't have quality information available in a way that would show up on a consumer education website, and that the lack of a 3-star or other high-quality indicator school-age programs showing up in listings does not necessarily mean anything about the quality of the available programs for school-age kids. So one thing that could be very helpful is if consumer education websites could find a way to include some type of disclaimer or explanation about whether or not school-age programs are part of a QIS or rated in a similar way to early childhood programs, so that parents can interpret the lack of quality information appropriately when they're looking at search results. So before we showed you some examples of really helpful filters and customization buttons, and now we'll go back to New Mexico for an example here of an example of some school-age friendly search results displays. So in this case, in New Mexico, once you launch a customized search or even just a general search without putting any type of customization information in it, this is what you see on the main results listing page. And you can note that it confirms the age range that you may have entered before to customize your search, or if you didn't choose to customize it, it provides the information right there on the search results listing. And then once you click on a provider or where it says more information, you then get details about subsidy acceptance. So then you can see the ages served again, along with the schedule and whether or not it accepts child care assistance. And Delaware is an example of a website that provides information about ages served and subsidy acceptance right in the main results listing without a user having to click on more detailed tabs to get more information, and without having to filter for this at the outset. So in Delaware, purchase of care means child care subsidy. And these types of search results listings that are really informative right on that main page can help to increase the odds that parents are going to find the websites helpful and use them as a go-to resource for finding school-age childcare. And that's what we kept coming back to with our scan and with the information that we gleaned from it, was thinking about this through the lens of a parent of a school-age child utilizing subsidies for childcare. What are some of those features that would perhaps increase the odds that parents would go to these websites as a go-to source for information and not rely on more informal means that aren't going to also be able to point them in the direction of things like inspection and monitoring reports and other really critical health and safety type features. So at that, I'm going to turn it back over to Amy.
Thanks, Heidi. We want to switch gears a little bit now to talk about resources, but before we do, I just want to remind everyone that you're welcome to type any questions that you may have into the chat box. If you have any questions in particular to search filters or results that we've talked about up to this point, feel free to submit that into the chat box, and we will certainly compile information and have that information available to you during the Ask Me Anything session in 2 weeks. So with that, since we focused a lot, like I said, on search functionality, and it's very important to make sure that that functionality and results are catered to school-age care, to make sure that that audience is not left out of your consumer education website search. It's also recommended that age-related resources are also available for school-age care. And so we want to take a look at some state and national examples now for school-age resources. And before we get into the specific examples, you want to think about how you can maybe leverage your existing partnerships and look into opportunities to collaborate with partners in order to compile information to put on your resources for school-age care. Think about what resources are pertinent to include. Take some time to reflect on key school-age stakeholders and how that collaboration on the information being provided can happen. So there's certainly room to support data integration to strengthen your search by working with partner agencies to optimize data sharing and integration. That could very well, an example of that would be license-exempt school-age programs and summer camps and any entities that operate those, as well as collaborations with after-school networks to leverage their data and maps. Also, the cross-posting and cross-promoting of resources and events via social media is another way to leverage those partnerships. Additionally, co-authoring resources related to school-age care, and then fostering partnerships with partners and key stakeholders that maybe you haven't worked as closely with in the past, and seeing what resources are available that can be leveraged to help enhance and support the information that you share on your consumer education website specific to school-age resources. And when you're thinking about expanding school-age resources, here are some additional options to consider. I think that it's important to note that you certainly do not need to think about recreating the wheel. You can post links to trusted resources or create tip sheets citing existing resources that are out there. But in thinking about choosing care resources, what types of school-age care options are available? You want to be sure to have resources related to that. How to select a quality school-age program, selecting quality summer care. That looks quite different from out-of-school care during the traditional school year, and summer care options as well. And then in thinking about child development best practice resources, many times we'll see developmental milestones that are have quite a few resources related to birth to 5, but we want to be sure that we're definitely including resources that focus in on the school-age developmental milestones and child development information as well. Also, information about summer learning loss and resources available to help prevent and reduce that over the summertime months. Reading resources and family activities. Another link that would be easy to tie into thinking about best practice resources are links for games that promote learning as well. So again, just to reiterate, there's no need to have to develop the content for all of these resources. It may be just being able to capture the information and capture links to already existing reliable resources that are available. With that in mind, we would like to take a moment to show just a couple of examples of how some resources have been integrated. This first example is from Tennessee, and they provide educational materials including information on why after-school care is important. They have a link on how to choose the right after-school program, and that link is noted there toward the bottom of your slide. Rhode Island is another state that has quite extensive information on resources on school-age care. One thing to note is that Rhode Island plans to make updates and modifications to their website under their preschool development grant. So this is something that will be undergoing modification. They actually have a couple of different tabs for after-school resources related to selecting a program. This first here shows their Bright Stars, and so it has information about what quality looks like for after-school care. And then additionally, this next tab for Rhode Island is from their Bright Beginnings, Bright Stars, I misspoke. And again, it goes over what does quality look like and has information about not only that, but how to choose quality. And you'll see there along the top, there's also an option and a tab that has information and resources related to summer learning. So they have quite extensive information that they tie to through both sites for school-age care. One state to note that we don't actually have a screenshot for, but has done a lot of wonderful updates to their website is Ohio. Their Bold Beginning consumer education website now organizes information via child age group tabs or tiles. So on the landing page, there's tiles for the different age groups, and they've compiled resources across key resource categories. Those categories include developmental milestones, special needs, health, and early education and care. They also have a dedicated tab for kindergarten through grade 3 resources and are implementing almost all of the resource enhancement recommendations from the consumer education infographic. Additionally, not only is the content very robust, the design and feel of their site is very appealing and family-friendly. So Ohio's site might be another one. Again, it's their Bold Beginning consumer education website that shows a great example of school-age resources. In thinking about national resources to support school-age information, Heidi and I want to take some time now to kind of hone in on a couple of key resources. The first being the childcare.gov website. There's an entire section on childcare.gov related to school-age care. You'll note there, too, that there is information that this information definitely can be used on your own website. You can take it directly from childcare.gov and, again, not have to spend time creating content. As you scroll down on the childcare.gov website, there are tips and information on choosing type of care. So states and territories can use the language on this page and other childcare.gov pages as well. I'm going to turn it back over to Heidi.
Thank you. So as you undoubtedly know too, information on developmental milestones is one of the recommended elements for consumer education websites. And one thing we want to point out is that it's really important that those developmental resources include a focus on school age. So with a lot of the resources and the developmental information that it's suggested, a lot of it is often focused on early childhood, but as we saw before, you've got over 45%, about 45% nationally, of kids served through subsidies being school age, and so there's a real need to make sure that parents and providers can get developmental information on milestones and supports that are specific to those needs. So the CDC has really great developmental milestones resources that focus in this particular case. They even split middle childhood into the 6 to 8 and then 9 to 11 years of age to make it really targeted and specific to the developmental needs of kids, which is great. And then we also want to call attention to the NCASE resource library that we have on our website. This is a library of curated resources that we have found across other national centers' work as well as the broader field that relate to school age. There's a wealth of different topics that are covered here, and hopefully if you look through this, you might find some information that would be worth putting onto the consumer education website as resources for both providers and for families. And I want to call attention to a couple in particular that really have resonance for consumer education efforts. So one is this Choosing a School-Age Child Care Provider, which is put out by Child Care Aware of America, but included in our resource libraries. You can access it that way as well as through other avenues. And this provides tips on choosing a school-age child care provider. So what's really nice about this is that as with other quality indicators and guidance around selecting a school-age program or selecting a child care program, this one is also developmentally specific to the school-age age range, which has different things that parents might want to look for when they're searching for a provider than what might be their core focus if they were looking for infant and toddler care or for a preschool program. So this is one great resource that's included that could be a helpful thing to include on websites. We also have on NCASE's website a consumer education toolkit that is focused on school age. So this toolkit, which is an interactive PDF, contains resources for state and program leaders as well as parents with topics that are aligned with the consumer education focal areas put forth in the final rule. So you can link to it through this link. There's also a section in there that we have added called a Spotlight on Summer, which includes some information that's really specific to summer, because as we talked about earlier, we do see this general uptick in the number of kids served through subsidies who are served during the summer months. So we want to make sure we're paying attention to that particular time frame and the needs that relate to that. And so one resource that we've recently put together and posted in the Consumer Education Toolkit as well as the library is a series of tip sheets that are designed, they're companion tip sheets for both providers and for parents that are meant to help promote learning and growth during the summer months for school-age kids. So this is something you can access through there. And what we wanted to do with this was to provide really easy to implement and feasible tips for providers and for parents for supporting school-age learning and growth during the summertime. And again, we were putting this together with the specific lens of on the parent side, parents who have limited time because they are working and limited resources. And so thinking about what's really feasible while still being able to move the needle on learning and growth if applied consistently. And the same for the providers. We recognize that a lot of the child care providers serving children during the summer months are not necessarily specialized summer learning loss prevention programs. So we wanted to take some of the best practices and principles of those programs and make them accessible and relatable to any school-age provider that's operating during the summer months. So that was the goal of these particular resources. They should be approachable and accessible to a wide range of providers as well as parents. So this is the one for providers, and then this is just a little snapshot of the one that is geared towards parents. But they are meant to complement each other, so we encourage the use of them as a pair. And then the last thing that I want to mention is making sure that everybody knows about the MOT statewide after-school networks, which are statewide entities that help to provide training and technical assistance and other support for school-age child care providers. In many states, these are the go-to resources for training and technical assistance because they have deep expertise in the school-age developmental domain and in school-age providers and how to help promote quality among school-age serving supporting organizations. So this is also included in the State Resources tab of childcare.gov, but it also could be helpful to consider including a link to the statewide networks on your particular state's consumer education website for easier access. So if providers want to access school-age childcare TA, they would have a really ready-made go-to source for doing that. And that wraps up what I have. Amy, I'll turn that back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Heidi. As we close the webinar and the call this afternoon, we want to go ahead and conduct another poll. This poll is just asking how much did your understanding about this topic improve as a result of this webinar. So if everybody could just take a quick moment to record your understanding level based on the radio buttons, we would appreciate that. Leave the poll open for just another couple of seconds. Great, thank you so much. And in addition, we also would like to know how likely you are to use the strategies that we talked about in your future work with consumer education websites. So in thinking in particular about child care search filters and results, as well as additional resources for school-age care. Again, we'll just leave the poll open for another moment for everyone to record your response. Great, thanks so much. We appreciate your participation in those polls, and we also want to just, as a reminder, the Ask Me Anything webinar that will be related to today's topic regarding school-age care on your consumer education website will be 2 weeks from today on September 26th from 2 to 2:30. The 30-minute follow-up will answer any questions from today. Please feel free. You'll see there in the chat box the link for the email address that you can send additional questions to. And at this time, we would ask if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and share them in the chat box. Or again, you're welcome to email them to us after today's webinar. Every individual question may not be answered during the webinar, but we will do our best to compile all of the information and have that available to everyone during that Ask Me Anything session. There is no need to register for the Ask Me Anything event, and the link and the information that you can get to is on the Hot Topics webinar series website. The next Hot Topic webinar will actually be on October 10th from 2 to 3 p.m. The topic is focusing on creating data governance structures for consumer education websites. Understanding data integration and governance can help maximize the information shared with families on your consumer education website. And so the focus of this webinar is really to demystify concepts such as data privacy and security, collection and distribution, as well as sharing and linking, and much more. Participants will learn how data can align with CCDF consumer education requirements, but also provide valuable information to families and enhance your state's knowledge of important data practices to help take you to the next step in your data journey. The registration link is available there on the slide. It is also available on the Hot Topic webinar series website as well. And finally, we want to have one additional poll to ask you all. Again, the current webinar series goes through December, and there's currently development about additional topics. So right now in the chat box that you see on your screen, we would like for you to just type in what additional webinar topics are of interest to you related to consumer education. We'll take a moment for everybody to have an opportunity to do that. for those of you that have participated in some of the prior webinar series, if there's anything that you wish you would have learned a little bit more about, feel free to also send that information to the email that was in the chat box, and we'll be going back to the main room in a minute to see the email address. Feel free to send any additional topics there as well as your questions. Right, so we appreciate it. We've got some typing in. We'll give it just another moment before we close this poll about additional webinar topics. Great, thank you so much. Okay. Here are some additional resources that are just general resources for consumer education, not necessarily focused strictly on consumer education. You'll see there that the first link is for the Office of Child Care ACF webpage that has all of the consumer education resources listed, as well as information on the ECTAS, the Early Childhood Training and Technical Assistance System, and the resources that are available there as well. This next page has the very first link you see here under the Consumer Education webinar series is the link to the landing page for the entire series. Again, recordings from all of the past webinars that started back in April are listed there, as well as consumer education resource guides that have been developed in relationship to the topics presented. And in thinking about changes that you may make to better serve your school-age families, one of the key resources that may be very helpful is the second sub-bullet listed there related to the guide for increasing search engine optimization. Leveraging your search engine optimization techniques to ensure your audience can find your consumer education website as well as the related resources. And then another one that may be key as well is the Measuring Web Traffic and Engagement Guide. You can utilize that guide to really review your web analytics to understand how your site might be performing related to your goals and also inform your consumer education website enhancements. So those are two key resources that would be pertinent related to the information that we've shared today. Just want to thank everyone for your participation in the webinar today. Again, as we close out, if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box. And again, if you think of any questions after the webinar, you can send them to the email on the screen, and that email is also in the chat box as well. We will also send a follow-up email with the address, and we hope to see you on the Ask Me Anything webinar on September 26th, 2 weeks from today. We'll answer as many questions as we can about making your website accessible to all families. And with that, we would just like to thank everyone for your participation today, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much.